Kia ora, my name's Robbie and I'm another white man behind a desk. So, COVID happened and inequality in New Zealand got worse. That's the headline. You've already got what you needed out of this video, so thanks for watching. But if you want to know how that happened, that's a little trickier to explain because no human understands how the economy works. You might think you know someone who understands the economy, but think about it, okay? Are they really human? I say no. And you might be thinking, Robbie, please, just shut up. I don't want to learn how the economy works. I trust my favorite political party. I'll just not understand the economy and let them handle it because they seem like good folks. No, you stop that. You never trust a politician, okay? Never. National and Labour are both willing to pretend that borrowing to invest is equivalent to a deadbeat dad buying everything on lay-by when it absolutely isn't. The Green Party pretends that the capital gains tax is a crucial part of reducing house prices when it absolutely is not. So you've got to understand how the economy works because politicians care more about public opinion than reality. And public opinion is dumb because we don't know how anything works. If we want to hold politicians to account, we do have to learn how shit works. It's our duty as citizens. So listen up, you bastard. I love you, and I want what's best for you. So, how did COVID increase inequality? Well, let's start with the Reserve Bank. What the hell is it, and what does it do?
What do you think the Reserve Bank does?
Manage the government's finances?
No, that's Treasury.
Hold bank accounts for people?
No, the Reserve Bank is the bank for the banks.
Manages inflation, prints our money and regulates our banks?
You've got it.
That's right. When they're not dismissing animated members of the public for not being smart enough, the Reserve Bank is basically the accelerator and brake pedal of the economy. Try to remember that analogy, okay? Accelerator, brake pedal. If prices are rising too fast, you can't afford stuff. And that's bad. So the Reserve Bank slows everything down by making it more expensive for people to borrow money. People borrow less, they don't spend as much, and prices don't rise as quickly. And if no one's spending any money, the opposite problem, and people are losing their jobs, that's also bad. So the Reserve Bank hits the accelerator. They make it cheaper to borrow money, so people start spending again. To put it into Tarzan speak, economy go too fast? Prices go up too fast? Reserve Bank slow down. Economy go too slow? People lose jobs? Reserve Bank speed up. And if you found that patronizing and frankly insulting, that's fair enough. But in my defense, I've had this stuff explained to me several times, and to be honest, that's the level of simplicity I personally require. So, the Reserve Bank speeds up and slows down the economy, and they do that with the official cash rate, which is how cheap or expensive it is for banks to borrow money. So if you ever hear anyone in the news talk about the OCR, that's what they're talking about. If it's higher and it's more expensive to borrow cash, that's the brake pedal. If it's lower and it's cheaper to borrow cash, that's the accelerator. And that's it. That's one of the Reserve Bank's main jobs. That's the first bullet point on their list of things they do, hitting that balance. Prices don't go up too fast, people are still employed. And hopefully that sort of made sense. It's okay if you immediately forgot it all or you want to punch me in the face. At least I know that my explanation was better than this Reserve Bank animation, which seems to imply that the OCR is a magical orb controlled by two wizards who then bounce it across the country, which is definitely a more exciting idea, but arguably also a worse explanation. Okay, so the thing is, sometimes the Reserve Bank is really hitting the accelerator, just absolutely flooring it, and the economy's still going too slow. No one wants to spend money, and people are losing their jobs. And that's what happened during COVID, okay? The OCR was at 0.25, which is pretty low because, as we all know, 0.25 is very close to zero. It's way closer than 100, for example, or 22, or California, which famously isn't even a number at all. So what else can the Reserve Bank do? I really like that joke. It's dumb, but I like it. So what else can the Reserve Bank do? They made it as cheap as possible for banks to borrow money, and people still weren't spending. A lot of people were about to lose their jobs. So it was time to bring out the NOS, the extra power button you keep hidden on the dashboard until that final moment you have to desperately escape a Morton Joe into the dust storm. Now try and keep that cool Mad Max metaphor in your head when I tell you that the NOS button is actually called Quantitative Easing. Please don't turn off this video. Please keep watching. Okay, Quantitative Easing, or QE, or QA, is when the Reserve Bank magics money into existence out of nowhere by slapping buttons on their computer like a reckless child. And then they smush that money into the economy through open market operations, which is a fancy term for buying stuff. And that stuff, in this case, was New Zealand government debt, otherwise known as bonds. So that's what the Reserve Bank did. They hit the NOS button. They magicked money into existence and bought some government bonds. Well, now there's more money in the system. Banks are more chill to lend it out to people, and borrowing is cheaper. Yay! Good news! You've found the speed boost button beyond the normal accelerator. You did it! We've avoided a recession and people have kept their jobs. Good job, Reserve Bank. Problem solved. End of monologue. Unless you're worried about inequality. Okay, you see, when the Reserve Bank was considering hitting the NOS button, they sent a letter to the Minister of Finance, Grant Robertson, and they said, hey, dipshit, this isn't an exact quote, by the way, but they said, hey, dipshit, just so you know, when we make borrowing really cheap, rich people are probably going to be the only ones who can afford to invest in stuff, and the stuff they invest in will be in hot demand, which means that stuff will become more expensive. And do you know who owns that stuff? Rich people. And because this is New Zealand and housing is the only good investment in the entire goddamn country, that means house prices might start skyrocketing, which means, you know, the rich might get richer and inequality might get worse. And that's not our job to deal with, Grant. That's your job. So, you know, maybe you should make a plan. And Grant said, cool, here's my plan. Shut up. And then he got out a lighter and he just tried to burn the email out of his computer. So that's what the Reserve Bank did. They saved the economy and at the same time made inequality worse, but they sort of knew that was probably going to happen, which is why they asked the Labour Party for help. And what did the Labour Party do to help? Well, first things first, they increased benefits by much less than the Welfare Advisory Group recommended. A recommendation they made, remember, before COVID even happened. So, good start there. But then, on the 23rd of March, they announced they were doing something about housing, the place where rich people keep all their money. So that was exciting. But what was the plan? Here are 3 key details. 1, they're going to let Kāinga Ora borrow more money to build houses, which is great news because more houses mean lower house prices. But will more money actually result in more houses? I mean, I hope so, but who knows? Because they've massively sucked at building houses in the past. The government has, I mean, if I set aside $1 million to build you a beautiful sculpture and then delivered you a turd in a box, you might be a little suspicious if I told you the good news that I've got another $1 million for a beautiful new sculpture. Okay, you might be expecting another turd in the box, and that I couldn't fault you on that. I'd accept that concern. Now 2, they've also extended the Bright Line test, which means that now if you sell a property within 10 years, IRD assumes you did it as an investor and we tax that profit, baby. Now, it's similar to a capital gains tax, but instead of taxing the profit everyone makes on their houses, the whole thing has been carefully designed to encourage people to just hold on to their houses for 10 years so they can avoid the tax entirely. Good system. Now 3, they're also changing it so that investors can't claim the interest on their mortgage payments as an expense for their business, which, to be honest, seems like a pretty big deal, and that might genuinely reduce demand from property speculators. Treasury hasn't given any advice on it yet, but Grant did it anyway, because he's a wild card. Pew pew, wild card. But the bottom line here is that housing is at the root of inequality in this country, and these housing policies might help slow the increase of inequality. Now that's important. They won't actually solve the problem of inequality. They're not a wealth tax or anything, but they might help the problem get worse more slowly. Now sure, we've had a drastic increase in inequality over the last 40 years with an especially bad increase under Ardern's Labour government, but we can't undo that. Okay, that's in the past. Like if I stole your car, I can't give it back. That's absurd, but I can promise to steal smaller things in the future. That's the Labour Party promise. And after all that, there is a chance that you might be thinking, Robbie, why does inequality even matter? I mean, so long as everyone has enough, who cares? Well, firstly, people don't have enough, but in a hypothetical world in which they did, inequality would still matter because, for better or worse, we live in a society of humans, and humans care about fairness. If you think they don't, just give one kid more lollies than the other and watch that kid commit their first murder. Fairness creates a sense of camaraderie between citizens. The kind of camaraderie people need to do their bit to prevent a pandemic when nobody's watching. The camaraderie that we need to feel valued, respected, and loved by our community, to feel like it cares about us and want to reciprocate that feeling of care. That sense of fairness used to be a core tenet of the Labour Party, an absolute priority. And now their absolute priority is first home buyers who might vote National. And that makes me sad. But it's not an insurmountable challenge. It's a mountain to climb, and it will take time. But if we can stand together, we can persuade the government, whichever government it might be, to do the right thing. The key, unfortunately, is knowing what the right thing is. And in order to do that, tragically, we kind of have to understand economics. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your support.